Claire wants to know why there's a picture of Daddy and Mom on the screen. Because I'm telling a quick story about Daddy and Mom as the introduction to today's message. I know. Is that crazy or what? That picture is from our engagement. So it's been a while. But I want to tell you about a moment on October 6, 2000. I've told it before, but it's a perfect story. I was wearing this suit that night, and I think I was wearing this tie. Both are older than that. Close enough. For many of us, life has taught us to react to unexpected news. Sadly, even amazingly good news with skepticism, has it not? We've been let down too much. Seen too many hoaxes, too many pranks and lies to respond right away with full acceptance. We have a built-in hesitancy. My favorite example, and one I've used before as Nicole is reminding you this morning, how many of you remember this example, really? I mean, it's probably been years. Is Nicole's response to my, and I will say this with all humility, eloquent and smooth proposal of marriage with ring in hand on October 6th in the year 2000. She responded with all conviction and with plenty of emotion, "Are you kidding me?" I mean, it's practically a Hallmark movie right there. It writes itself. She did say yes. It took a moment, but she was worried that perhaps this was some elaborate hoax. Took her to dinner in the nicest restaurant in Grand Rapids, brought her flowers, wore my suit, and she thought maybe that was a hoax. I mean, wow, that would have been mean. So I did not do that. Good story, Clara? Oh, she covers her face in shock at that story. I know, right? You have no idea what I'm really talking about, but that's okay. Let's look at our text from the Gospel of Luke this morning. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, verses 36 to 49, starting with 36, says this: "While they were still talking about this," we've already read the two passages that lead up to this from the Gospel of Luke. At this point, it is evening, perhaps even late in the evening of the first Easter Sunday. The women were at the tomb early in the morning. They saw an angel. They returned to tell the 11 about it. Peter, Luke tells us Peter, John says, I was there too in his gospel. They ran to the tomb, but they were left wondering because they didn't see Jesus. In the afternoon, two followers of Jesus, one of which we learned his name was Cleopas, went to Emmaus, only to have Jesus join them on the road and explain to them the prophetic words of the scriptures about the Messiah. They realized it was Jesus when he broke bread with them. But Jesus disappeared that moment. If we were preaching that message this morning, that is an interesting moment. He disappeared. What's going on? But we're not. They rushed back the 7 miles to Jerusalem. I'm guessing they went faster on the way back than on the way there, because on the way there they were despondent, they were worried, they were confused. They were happy on the way back with a little spring in their step. And they rushed to tell the 11, telling them it's true, the Lord has risen and appeared to Simon. To which the women probably thought, hello, we said that this morning. But I digress. There's plenty for them to be talking about, right? I'm not surprised at all that they were still talking about this, however much time has passed, because there's mystery, there's wonder, there's hope, there's doubt. There's all sorts of things to be talking about. This conversation is going to go on for hours, if not days and beyond that. Except Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." Thus the conversation about whether or not Jesus is alive, about who's seen this and who saw that, now it's moot. The women were the first at the empty tomb, the first to hear the glorious news of the resurrection. Whatever the faults of the disciples, whatever their shortcomings, and we know they had them, we would expect Jesus to appear to the 11 before the day is over, wouldn't we? If only in keeping with the tremendous investment of time and effort Jesus has put forth to making them fitting heralds of the gospel. I mean, come on, he put some time into these guys. He's gonna show up right. In addition, of course, to the fact that Jesus loved these men. They were his friends. From our perspective, this appearance is, of course, expected. Nice also to see Jesus offer peace to his disciples. After the trauma of the past 3 days, they certainly need it. How did they respond? They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. We expected the appearance. They may have hoped for it. But the sudden reality of seeing Jesus alive still scared them more than a little bit. It isn't easy to put ourselves fully in their shoes. The same is true of anything that happened to someone else. But why their minds leapt to the notion of a ghost rather than something else, including the truth that Jesus is alive, that's a real head-scratcher. It's hard for us to quite figure out what thought processes took them to that sudden thought that this is a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you troubled? And why do doubts rise in your minds?" I've referred to them as the 11. Technically, according to John, it's the 10, because evidently Thomas is not here this evening. They have responded with fear at the arrival of Jesus. So Jesus asked them, why? Had they all answered one by one, it would have been a fascinating discussion about each of their doubts and anxieties. But this is not the time for the focus to shift to the disciples. Jesus is the one who has risen from the dead. What he has to say and why he is here is paramount. And so Jesus leaves the question hanging and keeps going. He says, "Look at my hands and my feet. It's I, myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." Jesus takes the bull by the horns, which is a useful idiom that I would not recommend trying. He turns the focus of everyone standing here, all of whom were dedicated followers of Jesus, until, of course, they fled from the Garden of Gethsemane. And he has them focus on the wounds that he still bears from the nails of the cross. Ever stop for a moment and think about that? Unlike the resurrected future bodies that we will have, which we are told will be made anew, Jesus' body retains the marks of the crucifixion. God could have removed them, one would think. I mean, it's certainly within God's power to have taken them away. But as they are marks of sacrifice that now have become the marks of honor and victory, perhaps it isn't surprising that they still see them in his flesh. When he said this, he showed them his hands and feet. If the words aren't enough, Jesus invites them to closely inspect the tangible proof of his physical resurrection. Having endured the horrors of Good Friday and having emerged from the grave this day after conquering sin and death, Jesus is still willing to extend grace to his disciples, still willing to work to help them believe. And while they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, of course, now their disbelief has shifted. It's just too much. At some point, the human mind hits pause when confronted by more than it can process. We do this. People do this. The disciples are now in that too shocked to think straight mode. They need a minute. So he asked them, "Do you have anything here to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence. I know that after, coming back from the grave, what you want is broiled fish. Maybe Jesus really liked broiled fish. Wouldn't have been my first choice, but hey, whatever. So Jesus goes one more step forward toward putting their minds at ease by eating, just something that any normal living person would do. A further proof of life, an opportunity for his disciples to process the reality of his return. He said to them, "This is what I told you while I was still with you. So now it is time to move forward." The shock of his arrival has subsided sufficiently to begin to move ahead with Jesus' second purpose in coming here. The first being, of course, to let them know, yes, indeed, I am alive. Now what else do we need to do? Well, that purpose is to prepare the disciples for their next mission. But to embrace the future, Jesus must first take their minds back to the past. In the past are Jesus' oft-repeated predictions about his suffering, death, burial, and resurrection. Now, nobody likes to hear, "I told you so," although most of us get a perverse and not very Christian pleasure out of saying it. This isn't that. The previous predictions illustrate that the events which have unfolded were not a fluke. They were part of a plan. So he talks about the plan. Everything must be fulfilled that was written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms. This is a plan that goes back a long, long way. Now, Jesus told his disciples this back before his death. In Matthew 25:34, he told them that this plan had begun before creation itself. It should not surprise us that references to it are scattered throughout the Hebrew Scriptures. Not only in Moses, the prophets, even the Psalms. Even their worship music had predictions in it about this day. God didn't reveal beforehand every last detail of Jesus' mission as the redemptive Lamb of God. But all that he did chose to foreshadow came to pass. For God's veracity is not in doubt. If the chaos, seemingly, of the last 3 days was actually a fulfillment of God's plan from the beginning, then it's safe to say God has a plan for what's to come next as well, one would think. And he opened their minds so they could understand the Scriptures. Jesus needs to walk the disciples through his last statement. What was written, what it meant, how it applied to Jesus. How many pastors and theologians and frankly ordinary Christians would love to be a fly on the wall that day, right? To have Jesus explain all of those texts that we argue about and try to figure out and try to understand. And there are probably some that we haven't noticed, some that we misunderstand. He explained them to them. Makes me wonder what prevented them from understanding before this time. And that's hard to say. Such things are always easier to piece together in hindsight. He told them, this is what is written. The Messiah will suffer and rise from the dead on the third day. That's not an actual quote. It's not spelled out like that exactly in the prophets. It's a summation of the various prophecies, the theme that one gathers from them. And Jesus helped his disciples grasp that this Easter evening. Thus, the crucifixion was not a defeat personally for Jesus, nor was it a deviation from the intended purpose of the Messiah. The prophets spoke of this mystery in generations past. Now that it has been fulfilled and the picture has gained clarity, what now? Repentance for the forgiveness of sins will be preached in his name to all nations, beginning at Jerusalem. Now that the disciples finally understand what Jesus accomplished in fulfilling the prophecies of old, he can continue with giving them their task moving forward, and that is evangelism. The good news of the resurrection will go forth throughout the earth, taken to all nations by followers of Jesus in every generation, who will put that death and the victory over death that followed in context for those whom they share the news with, showing it to be God's plan to overcome sin by forgiving those who repent and trust in Jesus. It will start in Jerusalem, and it will explode outward in every direction. Jesus tells them, "You are witnesses of these things. Who better to begin this worldwide process of preaching than the men and women who witnessed God's plan unfold through Jesus firsthand?" It's these same eyewitnesses who wrote down their experiences. Matthew and John, or were told them by those, and then they wrote it down like Mark and Luke, to preserve it for us, to allow us to follow in their footsteps with the same confidence that our ancestors in the faith had about its veracity. And then he says to them, "I'm going to send you what my Father has promised, as the old infomercials always promised you, but wait, there's more." Jesus won't be leaving his followers to face this task alone. They are armed with the greatest story ever told, but they're going to need more, and the Father's plan includes it. And finally, he says to them, "Stay into the city until you've been clothed with power from on high." Power from on high sounds pretty cool, and it is. Luke will begin his story of the early church, we call it the book of Acts, where he leaves off here with a little bit of overlap. And the coming of the Spirit at Pentecost will be the spark that lights the fire of evangelism beyond Jerusalem. The first Easter was filled with questions, wonder, fear, joy, sightings, and finally, face-to-face conversation with Jesus. That's a lot for one day. But as it comes to a close, Jesus leaves his disciples with the promise that while his work is done, theirs is only beginning. The world needs to know the good news, that forgiveness of sins is freely offered to all because Jesus Christ died for our sins and returned to life in victory. 3 thoughts of application for us about this Easter Sunday text. Jesus was willing and able to put an end to the speculation and overcome his followers' fear in person. Certainly an encouraging thought. Secondly, new life on the third day was the plan all along. This was exactly what God intended. And then lastly, of course, for us, the next step after hearing the good news is sharing the good news.